Okay, so we'll do a walkthrough of sold days. And so I'm just going to do a quick run through the profit pricer just to kind of build up to the ultimate explanation of what a sold day really is. Okay, so this is a tool that we use in Nextstart to determine a company's break even. And we're determining two things, break even per hour and break even per day for install crews. All right, so it starts with a company setup. And I've just got a fictional company in here, but for all the direct labor calculations that goes into it, workers' comp rate is typically a variable. Next, we put in headcount. How many technicians? This could be plumbers. This particular example is a HVAC company. So we have plumbers, and for the technicians, we're coming up with an hourly rate. And at the end of this calculation, we'll come up with what is the break even per hour. We'll apply a profit margin to it and come up with a billable hour rate. We're going to do the same thing for the install crews. And so the 2 crews would technically be four guys, let's say, 2 teams. And we're going to come up with what is their break even per day. All right. Any questions so far?
No, understood.
Okay, cool. So next we just plug in compensation. What do we pay the lead? What do we pay the helper? Next, we're going to calculate time off because this equates to lost production. So we've got 2 categories, time off that we pay for, like vacation and sick days, and below that, maybe other time on average per technician they would take off, per year that they don't get paid for. So even though we're not paying for that, these other 5 days, let's say, it still is 5 days less of production available to you. All right, so next we're going to come up with the efficiency. And the efficiency, kind of like on the Service Titan dashboard, the technician sold efficiency. It's kind of like that. If we averaged all of our technicians and how many hours they sold per day, what is their efficiency? All right, so if they were assuming an 8-hour day, if they sold 4 hours a day, they're 50% efficient. If they sold 2.4 hours a day, they would be 25% efficient, so there's or 2 hours a day would be 25%, 30% would be 2.4, 35% would be 2.8. So we're just determining what is their efficiency, but we're trying to figure it out for the entire year. Okay, so what I coach members to do is think of this as a day because it's a little easier to wrap your head around that. But we want to come up with, in an 8-hour day, what are our techs actually, how many billable hours are they actually selling? Okay. Now for the crews, it's a little bit harder because after our holidays and PTO and other time off, that left us with 242 available working days. Okay, no holidays, no weekends, just available working days. We've got 242 to a year, and we're saying, okay, we've got a lot of seasonality with this installation crew, but we keep these guys pretty doggone steady. We estimated that 80% of the time they're going to be installing money. So if they leave the shop that day to install or to go back on a code correction or do some warranty work, that's not considered a sold day. All right. So this is just a tab where we come up with our estimated efficiency. Now, members that have been in Nexstar for a while usually have some data to support this. Newer members, we have to kind of help them figure it out. All right. Any questions about the efficiency tab? Okay, cool.
No, this makes sense.
Okay, so the next 4 tabs, we're just inputting everything off a company's income statement. So every expense of that company, we're going to plug in. This is going to be, marketing, office salaries, owner compensation, Nexstar dues, Service Titan fees, everything that they pay for. Boom, it's an overhead expense that goes in here. The next 5 tabs, we're just looking in our crystal ball and trying to look forward 12 months and say, what's going to go up or what's going to go down? Okay, most things are going to go up. We might estimate an increase in fuel costs. Healthcare probably going to go up. If we're going to add another service manager, then we're going to build that in here. because we don't want to come up with a break-even price that's obsolete as soon as we roll it out. We really want to try to anticipate our future adjustments. Okay.
Okay.
The next 4 tabs, we're going to take all of that overhead expense and we're going to distribute it between these departments. So in this example, we've got a service department and an install department. Now, you want to do it based on, what we recommend is do it based on either revenue, or not revenue. You want to do it based on time or possibly headcount. Allocation of time is usually a better way to distribute expenses. And the reason for that is typically an install crew might be 70% of a company's revenue, but it wouldn't be fair to saddle that department with 70% of the expenses. Okay. But if you did it based on headcount, we had 6 techs and we had 4 installers, that's probably a little bit more equitable way to break out costs. All right. So, and you could go line for line and tailor these if you wanted to, but we've also got the ability just to kind of plug in a, whatever percentage that needs to be. So that's what the next 4 tabs are. We're just distributing the overhead expenses. And then after we do all that stuff, we get our result. And so the result is our direct labor for every hour that we sell costs us $55. Our vacation cost us, $2.99, and our unbilled travel time, all the unbilled expenses, which would be driving to and from a call, callbacks, training, things like that, cost us $136 for every hour that we sell. So our total direct labor cost is $195. Our overhead, which would be all the indirect expenses that we plugged in, is another, let's call it $100. So our break even for every hour that we sell is $294.96. So we apply a margin on top of that. We typically coach members to do a 25% margin, not a 10%, because the reality of it is you're going to have discounting, you're going to have give backs. If you shoot for a 25 and you end up at 15, then you're golden. If you shoot for 10 and you miss it by 15, you lost money. So
yeah, understood. Okay.
And then we've got the billable hour rate for our SPP customers, which is the result of adding the margin. All right. And then, because typically SPP customers, it's not really that we're discounting them, we're just adding another 15% for non-SPP customers. So our billable hour rate in this example would be $462. All right. Now for the crews, same kind of thing. We're looking at what does that direct labor cost us per day for every day that we sell. All right. Unbilled time, all that kind of stuff. So direct labor was $854 per every day that we sell, and the overhead that we're going to apply to that, everything left over, was $798 per day. So the break even for that crew, and again, we said that crew was going to be 80% efficient. So in other words, out of those 242 days that we had, 80% of those are going to be install or sold days. Okay. So typically most companies don't apply a SPP discount for installs, only for service. So that means that crew, the sold day rate for that crew is $22.02 in this example. So if you went to your price book and said, okay, I'm going to build HVAC install pricing for this piece of equipment, and I know it takes 2 days for a crew to do that job, we're going to go $22.02 times 2. Okay, so that's going to give us 2 sold days, plus we're going to add our equipment and material costs marked up 25%, and we're going to add sales costs, which would be commission, financing fees, and those types of things. And that would give us, really what our price book would say that install was worth. Okay.
Okay.
So I know I went through that super fast, but yeah.
No, that makes sense to me. So basically, you're taking into account all of your overhead costs. You're looking into the crystal ball, and you're thinking about what potential increases we're looking to make. And then really what the end result is you're taking a look into, what is your overhead What do we need to break even? Let's take into account our 25% profit margin to see what we're pricing. So that makes sense to me, conceptually speaking. So from here, in terms of looking between HVAC techs and install crews, it appears that for HVAC techs, we're billing by the hour, where install crews we're billing by the day. And my assumption, because we spoke about this before, Jody, is that we bill by the day for install crews. Is it simply because they're typically always doing at least one day of work, like when the crew goes out? Is that right?
Yeah. Or more often than not, and there are exceptions, but more often than not, let's say it's a day and a half job. Let's say that, we think it's going to take that crew a day and a half. But the reality of it is that half day is usually lost. So that's why we recommend we make that job 2 sold days, not 1.5 sold days, because when that crew leaves the barn, you're probably not going to get another install out of them in that half day.
Fair enough. Okay.
Yeah.
So that makes sense to me. So is it fair to assume that would you say like a sold day, is it equivalent of, like, if you take the sold day and divide it by 8, would that give us the sold hours for that day? Does that make sense, Jody?
I think you'd have to massage the calculation a little bit because because we're applying different efficiencies to it. In other words, you couldn't take the 462 times 8 and come up with a reasonable sum, because you have different factors, different labor, different everything else. Now, could the calculation be manipulated to divide this by 8, for example? Yeah, there's probably a workaround for it. But I think the key is not to assume that it's going to be. You still have to round it up to a full day's worth of hours, I think, is the key, if that makes sense.
Understood. Okay. And I'm just looking back at my notes here to see if I have any follow-up questions.
Yeah.
And thank you so much for showing me this. This is very clear.
Good.
Let me just see. Okay, I think that covers it for now.
All right.
My one question from so what we're looking at right now is we have a copy of the PACE report, and we're building it, and we're basically making it so all the inputs populate in Service Titan. What we haven't done is we haven't built a profit pricer though. In the version of the PACE report we're looking at, we don't have a profit pricer. So I'm just thinking about how members will use it. If members go through this exercise with their coach, such as yourself, they get all this information here and then put it into Service Titan, then they'll be able to take a look in the PACE report to see what their budgets and goals are in comparison to what actually happened on the job. So really, what you're showing me here is this is just a profit pricer. Is that right? This isn't baked into the PACE report?
Yep.
Okay. So is it fair to assume that the profit pricer is basically like the homework you do before, and once you know how you're pricing everything and what your goals are, you would take that information and put it into the PACE report?
This is really designed more for the price book, and what we coach members to do is do the profit pricer, at a ideally every 3 months, but at a minimum, do it every 6 months. And not everybody does that, but that's what we coach them to do, because every single day in business, your margin is getting eroded. Costs are going up. Something's happening. You're increasing overhead, whether you know it or not. So what we recommend is do this every 6 months at an absolute minimum, so that you can find out what your true break even is now and what is your billable hour rate should be. Boom, go to your profit pricer, input your new price book with the adjusted pricing, and that way you're always continuing to get your margin.
Okay.
So
that makes complete sense to me.
Yeah, so it's a little less tied to the budget than it is the price book. But another layer of this that we should probably try to be forward thinking on. I know that there's been some discussions of how can we really lean on Service Titan to be a component for our business planning workshops. Because if you're going to have this much data in there to populate, billable hours and really thinking about the budgeting process, ideally we would want our members to be able to lean on Service Titan reporting to populate, 2020 budgeting information, for example.
Yeah, that's actually something that Shane Rao and I took a look into last year. So we were able to, without any custom development, we were able to get very, very close with our current custom reporting that we have, that members could just make in their account, develop a business planning report. But we ultimately determined that we would need to do future developments to make it like 100% capturing all the KPIs. So that's something we're looking into doing after we finalize this PACE report. So that would be the next one up to bat. Yep.
Cool.
So,
all right.
Good stuff. This is very clear to me, and you answered all my questions, Jody. Thank you for teaching me something new today, as always.
Oh no, I went through it pretty fast because I know you're a sharp guy. So I'm going to stop the recording now, and then maybe we can talk just briefly about price book.
Yeah, sure, absolutely.